tattoos are so sexy.
Wow, thank you, baby. Alright, well today I wanted to talk about tattoos and how much they help in attracting women. I'll be using my own personal experience as well as things that I've noticed over the years. Tattoos can definitely help with attracting women, but it's definitely not a make or break. They can be a really good bonus as long as they're very high quality. If a woman finds you physically attractive, she's most likely going to like your tattoos. She has to like how you look though first in my experience. She may like something about your appearance, like your height or your face first, and then she'll be attracted to your tattoos. There's definitely a looks threshold for each woman in my experience before they find your tattoos to be appealing. In some cases, a woman may be somewhat on the fence about you, but if you have high quality tattoos, then this can sometimes be enough to flip that switch for her. If she doesn't find you attractive in the slightest, you could have the coolest tattoos in the world, but she won't find you attractive despite your tattoos. She could find your tattoos to be very cool, and she could actually like really appreciate like the work of art that was created, but if she's not attracted to your physical looks, the tattoos aren't going to be enough to change that. Tattoos kind of give off like the classic bad boy vibe, and it kind of says to the world that you don't really give a shit about what people think. So depending on the tattoo, it can have a special meaning and can really help you kind of stand out from the crowd, especially if the tattoo is high quality and it looks like it could have some good meaning to it. Also, depending on where you are, tattoos are going to be more prevalent. So as an example, like a real world example would be if you're in a room of 20 guys and you're the only guy to have visible tattoos and you're somewhat attractive, this will definitely help you attract women as you're just going to stand out and you're going to have more of a masculine, edgier type of look. And I think a lot of women like hearing stories of an interesting tattoo that they see if they're attracted to you. Occasionally I'll have a girl approach me at a bar and comment on my tattoo. It doesn't happen too often, as though I'm not covered in tattoos. It's definitely a good way of building rapport and telling a story behind your tattoo. This can definitely get you in the door. Most times if a woman walks up to you and comments on your tattoo, it's going to be something like, hey, I like your tattoo, like what is it? Or they'll walk up and be like, what's your tattoo? Or what is it? And they do that, most of them do that because they saw you and they found you physically attractive, and the tattoo is really just a conversation starter for them. A lot of times, sometimes they don't even care about the story behind it. It's more of just a way for them to, initiate that conversation with you. I've also found that if you're covered in visible tattoos, a lot of women are going to find it attractive, but it's also going to be very polarizing, especially if you have tattoos on places like your neck, hands, or your face. I've also found that women fall into a few camps when it comes to tattoos. The first camp is there are women that find tattoos like incredibly attractive. It's hard to put a percentage on this, but I'd say about 10 to 20% of women find tattoos like very, very appealing. These women typically either have a lot of tattoos themselves. This is usually the case. Usually the girls who really love tattoos on guys, are covered in them, usually in their arms, their back, sometimes their neck, sometimes their face. But typically the women that tend to like tattoos on guys the most, it's pretty common sense, but it's women that have a ton of tattoos themselves. That's not 100% always the case, but I'd say it's about 99% the case. I think a big reason behind this is, their dad, their brother, maybe their first boyfriend, maybe a lot of guys that they grew up with had a lot of tattoos, and this is just kind of what they became accustomed to. So when they see you who has a lot of tattoos and they find you physically attractive, maybe they like how tall you are, maybe they like your bone structure, maybe they like your eye color, your hair, your physique. When they're physically attracted to you and then they see your tattoo, it kind of gives you that like masculine type of look, gives you that edgier type of look. And I think there's a familiarity, comfortability factor with tattoos for the women that really like them. And they see that in you. This group of women can also really find like face and neck tattoos really attractive as well. Like face and neck tattoos are going to be extremely polarizing to women, but this type of woman, I'd say, 10% are going to be really into that face and neck tattoo look. Ultimately, it's going to depend on the woman, But I've seen that. For the most part, I found that most women are fairly indifferent towards tattoos for the most part. They'll typically find your tattoo appealing if they find you attractive. So, like I said, something like your face or your height or something about your looks will be what attracts this type of woman initially, and then your tattoo will be like a bonus to them. Essentially, for this camp of women, like you having tattoos or not having them will make very little difference to her, and she's mainly going to be attracted to you for other physical traits that you have initially. This camp of women will definitely find tattoo sleeves, or let's just say you have a few tattoos on your arm, or you have a tattoo on your back, or you have a few tattoos on your legs. This type of women, like most women, are going to find that attractive. They're not going to see that as a turnoff, but this type of woman typically isn't going to be into the face or neck tattoo look like the first camp of women is, essentially. There's also a small minority of women that really don't like tattoos. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but in my experience, I found that women who grew up in like very wealthy families, I'm not talking like an upper middle class neighborhood that you see in every town. I'm talking about like very like ultra high net worth wealthy families. So think of like old money in Greenwich, Connecticut, or Scottsdale, Arizona. Think of like those types of places, or maybe for Europe, a place, I can't really give Monaco as an example, but think of like a very wealthy town in like a country in Europe. Those types of places, the old money families, they tend to look down on tattoos. They tend to view them as trashy. They tend to view them as like lower class in general, especially in the US. I think of wealthy towns like Greenwich, Connecticut, Atherton, California, Palm Beach, Florida, the Hamptons in New York. Like women that grew up in those very rich families, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time will view tattoos as trashy, as lower class, as I said. And I think in these areas, tattoos are really looked down upon as low class by like the older generations of the old money. So think of the old money baby boomers, or possibly like Gen X, I would say. This type of thinking, because tattoos weren't as prevalent when they were younger and old money typically doesn't have any tattoos, this type of thinking gets passed down to the younger women in these super wealthy families. As a byproduct, those types of women, when they see tattoos, they subconsciously, view them as trashy, and they kind of associate you with that as well, even if they find you attractive. Now, if they find you really, really attractive, they find your look really, really attractive, your tattoo isn't likely going to be a deal breaker for them. But this is just kind of a subconscious bias that I've seen with these very wealthy families, girls in these very wealthy families, in my somewhat limited experience with them. Like I said, this is kind of the exception to the rule, as tattoos, they've become much more popular than they were 20 to 30 years ago. And there's much less of a stigma, especially among younger people. I've definitely noticed that certain types of women also like tattoos more than others. I've found that more like artsy, hipster, liberal type of women, they tend to like tattoos a lot more than conservative women. This is definitely not always the case, but I found this to be largely true. So like as an example, in Charleston, South Carolina, if you go out on King Street as an example, a lot of the women are going to be fairly conservative. You're really going to come across as many like liberal women. But if you go to a place like a lot of places in, say, like New York City, like in Brooklyn, as an example, you'll tend to come across a lot more liberal women that will be more attracted to tattoos. That's just like a rough example. That's like a very general example. But that's kind of like where I'm coming from and what I've seen. Like as an example, like also years ago when I used to go out a lot more, I would tend to attract more like liberal artsy type women when I was wearing like, V-necks or like t-shirts that like showed off visible tattoos. And then I also noticed that when I wore like more professional dress shirts or sweaters that covered up tattoos, I tended to attract more professional or conservative type women. Going off location, I think this is also important. I think if you go to most bars or most clubs, most places in most cities, tattoos are pretty accepted and they're pretty common. So your tattoos will either help you or not make much of a difference. But if you go to I found that if you go to more upscale lounges or like country clubs, in the places that I mentioned, like I said, I have very, very limited experience in country clubs, but sometimes the general consensus in like those more upscale places can tend to view tattoos as trashy and subconsciously associate you as trashy as a byproduct. In some cases, your tattoos can also hurt your attractiveness to women. So to give you an example, I knew a guy from high school that had a tattoo of his favorite hockey team on the right side of his neck, and it looks pretty hilarious, to be honest. I can't imagine a lot of women, when they see his tattoo, they see the hockey, the hockey team's logo on the right side of his neck. I can't imagine a lot of women are gonna find that attractive. I also think that like excessive like gang tattoos on your face or your neck will definitely be a turnoff to a lot of women, a lot of the women that are kind of in the middle about tattoos. But those type of tattoos are also going to be attractive to a certain type of woman also. So it's, it'll be polarizing in that regard. But all in all, I think tattoos can be a slight bonus if they're of high quality, and they're also a great conversation starter. They're not going to be as important as other physical traits like, your height, your bone structure, your physique, your hair, in my experience. I think the key is to not get tattoos like solely for women. But if you want to get a tattoo, if there's some meaning behind it, because at the end of the day, you got to remember that tattoos are permanent and they're going to be on your body, and they're going to be on your body for the rest of your life. I mean, sure, you can get them removed, but that's going to be extremely painful and super expensive. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to comment down below and feel free to subscribe. Until next time, take care.